Our country is depending on us, on this community, to lead the way. We cannot fear the future. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Say the words. Say the words. Say them. Say them out loud. You are powerful. You are the N.E.A. Hold your head high. Hold your head high. N.E.A. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Hold your head high.
Please, girl, lady, just stop. You doing too much.
Welcome. I am Dena, and you're tuned to another discussion with Dena. Now, the previous clip is one of the latest from N.E.A, or the National Education Association.
We will protect our students. Dozens protested the latest cuts to the federal government. This time, the target is on the Department of Ed.
I am outraged, and America, you should be outraged too.
Becky Pringle is the president of the National Education Association, which lobbies and advocates for public education and educators.
We know that with half your department being fired today, that the services that our students and our parents rely on, that come directly from the federal government, will be interrupted, will be eliminated.
Tuesday night, the Department of Ed announced that 50% of employees are being fired, taking the total from 4,133 down to 2,183 employees, which includes the nearly 600 employees who accepted the voluntary resignation opportunities the past 7 weeks. Tuesday afternoon, Department of Ed employees got this email letting them know that all education offices in the National Capital Region will be closed on Wednesday due to security reasons, and that they should come get their laptops by 6 p.m. Tuesday. Who is the most impacted by these decisions?
All of our students are impacted. Our most vulnerable students, those who have been historically marginalized, are our students whose parents have to work 2 and 3 jobs, and they need that extra support from every level of government.
Our country is depending on us, on this community, to lead the way. We cannot fear the future. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Say the words. Say the words. Say them. Say them out loud. You are powerful. You are the N.E.A. Hold your head high. Hold your head high. N.E.A. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Hold your head high.
Jackie, I don't know about you, but my ear hurts after all the yelling.
That was special.
Yeah, it's something special. All right, so joining us now is former Education Department press secretary during Trump's first term, Angela Morabito. You know, Angela, does the DEA exist to represent teachers and students, or just to oppose Donald Trump?
It exists to drive a radical political agenda. I see that video and I think, wow, she needs to try decaf. And I also think, wow, she needs to try actually doing what's right for students. And that is putting education first. You look at these resolutions and it's not hard to see why they tried to keep them a secret. They're doing things that have nothing to do with education and everything about driving a radical agenda. Not just making it their official policy to call Donald Trump a fascist whenever they can, but also budgeting more than $200,000 to try and shield teachers from accountability when they talk about gay and transgender issues in the classroom. That is anti-student, anti-parent, and in many states, it's also anti-rule of law.
I really took a look at all of this during COVID, but the whole system continues to deteriorate as time passes on, Angela. But there's the Trump of it, which we just discussed. I want to move to this because the N.E.A. is also cutting ties with the Anti-Defamation League over its support for Israel, calling it profoundly disturbing. Supporting Israel is profoundly disturbing. That is what they're saying. The Anti-Defamation League CEO, Jonathan Greenblatt, responding earlier today.
And the reality is, it's an organization that clearly has been overtaken by activists. You know, these individuals are there to teach our children in the classroom, you know, the basics of reading and writing and arithmetic, not radicalism. To target the oldest organization in the country fighting anti-Semitism, it's bewildering, but it's bigotry.
Angela, this is all intentional. What they want to do is create a whole new generation of little communist, Trump-hating anti-Semites that basically then will spread that agenda as time passes on.
That's exactly right. 5 or 10 years ago, we were all talking about colleges as these indoctrination centers. Well, teacher union bosses are saying, let's not wait until they get to college. Let's start indoctrinating these kids really, really young and without the knowledge or consent of their parents. Teacher unions have a really sad but pretty long history of backing anti-Semitic initiatives. There have been draft resolutions about cutting ties with Israel, and it's troubling in the first place that these people think they have the authority to dictate America's foreign policy. But it's also troubling that they think they have the right to drive their agenda in the classroom. There are union members who have been caught driving anti-Semitic content on really young kids and inspiring, motivating students to walk out in support of Palestine, really in support of Hamas. It's terrifying. I'm grateful to y'all for shining a light on it because every parent in America needs to be aware.
You know, Angela, how much power and influence does the N.E.A. have?
That totally depends on where you are in the country. If you are in a place like Chicago, your teacher union is actually part of the AFT, but they not only handpicked the mayor, but they're effectively writing their own contract with the school district. That is an obscene level of power, and it shows you that failing test scores in that city and in so many other union-controlled cities are not an accident. But look, these unions are panicking, and they should be because school choice is on the march across the country. Their business model is over.
Yeah. And Angela, you know, I'm watching this play out in real time right here in New York City for the mayor's race. When you look at the voters who wanted Mandami to be on the Democrat ticket here, he is a self-professed socialist. And you say, well, where did they come from? They're actually not the poor part of this society. They're the elites that were educated in these institutions. And so you see that agenda play out and you realize how dangerous this can be.
And Zoran is that as well.
Yeah.
He's an elite that went through those institutions.
Yeah, they hold what I would call luxury beliefs. When you are scraping by for every penny and just trying to get by in America, you want school choice. You want your kid to have a great opportunity. But when you can kind of sit in the ivory tower or sit from a position of what they would call privilege and I would call blessing, you can have those beliefs like, of course, we should let men play in women's sports. It's inclusive, right? When it's not your daughter, not your child. These people are detached from reality. The painful reality is that 1 in 3 8th graders is functionally illiterate. The system we have does not work, and throwing more money at it just isn't going to fix it.
Well, when it comes to the anti-Semitism topic discussion, or even when it comes to labeling one to be that, it is often one-sided. It's often confusing and quite questionable. A person in direct disagreement with Israel, what it does, has done, and is doing does not necessarily make that person anti-Semitic. It just doesn't. And I would question the ADL even being involved in shaping public school policies and curriculum. That will open the door. Why can't you invite other groups to do so? So as parents, yes. But as an organization, not so much. It just reminded me of why homeschooling and teaching my own was the best choice for me and my family. Not just because of the rhetoric we see today and some of the behaviors or agendas that are pushed, but as far as I can look back into the past, I can see how those that we choose to educate or make rules governing how we educate our children have had long-lasting effects upon some of our children. It can affect their self-esteem, their sense of self-awareness, their sense of pride and self and acceptance of themselves and their kind. It all can be contributed to a certain degree, not completely, but it plays a role, and it is important to me who educates and who deals with the mind of my youth, my babies, especially after learning what was said to Malcolm X. That was so very interesting, and not just Malcolm X, but to many of our ancestors in particular. It seems many choose or have chosen to overlook or simply ignore the importance of who and what is being taught to young, free thinking, and uncorrupted, impressionable minds. And I do understand what many parents are dealing with today. But I also ponder the effects. The Unfortunately, we don't have studies or any statistics that I am aware of that expounds into the cause and effect upon our community exclusively for the effects of what is taught or not taught to them about themselves and their history in school. Now, assimilation is taught, it is encouraged, and even though very few honestly admit to it, um, we have to ask ourselves, what are we teaching our children to assimilate into? There's no denying it is a society built by black bodies. We like to ignore that or change or reword it, but it is a fact. It was something that is no denying. You can't deny that any way you look at it or talk about American history. And we know that anti-blackness was also built and woven and constructed into this society. Black subjugation is a part of it, and it should be told to your children so that they understand what, when, and why. It is so relevant. It is so necessary that our children understand that it's not the beginning of us. However, it is an important part of their lives. It is important that they know this and build upon it. But what is it that we expect our educators, our teachers, and those in that profession to do when we send our little ones over to them to educate them? It is a very profound topic of discussion and one that needs to be discussed, one that we should be dealing with. How can we and what can we do to make certain that their little minds are not being exposed to what we don't want it to be exposed to, and that they have a clear and precise understanding of who they are and how they became who they are? Because it can have an everlasting impression. And many of our ancestors have bear witness to what was told to them by so-called educators. It was seen that many today choose to simply overlook or ignore the significance or the importance of who teaches and what is being taught to our youth, particularly at the sponge years, the sponge ages, when they are extremely impressionable. They are naive at a certain point, and their little minds are still developing, and they just soak up everything. I mean, at that point, they're not corrupted like a chalkboard, or I liken it to an erase board. It's clean, never used, it's unsoiled, it's not contaminated, and they're just unscripted at that age. Devious, duplicitous individuals understand this as well, and they can use this as a prime opportunity to begin the process of grooming or implementing their own ominous agenda. We've seen that in many cases. Now, this chalkboard or erase board that I am metaphorically speaking of course, is the child's mind. Now, those with agendas that they want to push upon them. They see it as a golden opportunity to change their future reality or their future perspective. They want to try to impress upon them. In lifestyle choices, they start feeding. It's like it's a form of grooming. They begin to scribble distorted facts upon this clean, clear erase board. They're introducing immoral ideas or even unethical behavior that is contrary to what is the norm on this erase or chalkboard, which once again is the young and certainly very impressionable minds of our babies. That is why we need good parents. We need good parents, good teachers, and educators who are concerned about our children's mind, who are concerned about guarding it and making sure that they don't become victims of these individuals who are guilty of indoctrination, because that seems to be the purpose for many today, to indoctrinate our youth, including but not limited to promoting alternative lifestyle agendas, personal, political, racial, even religious agendas, as well as sexually exploitative agendas. We see a lot of that today. Now, introducing certain information with malicious intent. Some that is their goal. They're priming or grooming, and it's still a form of tampering with the young mind. It's taking advantage of their innocence. It's predatory. It just is. You simply cannot trust, because someone is classified as an adult, that they have the best interest of our children in mind when they are developing certain agendas in these schools, or even when they are hired to teach or to educate our children. We often forget that individuals have their own ideas. They have different lifestyles and ideologies that we must consistently monitor and supervise, even when they are chosen and put in positions to teach our children. They still need to be monitored to make certain that they are not being or imposing their own views upon our children when you send them off to be taught or to be educated. And by the way, what is education? And what is the real purpose? And how can you even be sure that they are not just simply being indoctrinated? And we can't say that we haven't been touched by it to a degree, because all of us have. And there has been some ideas as to the primary purpose of schooling from various political perspectives. Much of it was due to specifically to do certain jobs. Now, to educate someone is to give them the necessary tools in which they themselves can utilize or build upon, to supply them with information in an effort to allow them to flourish, to accomplish, and to elevate themselves. That can include their communities, society, and eventually the world in which they live. Now, the difference between education and indoctrination today, there is such a very thin line, and many educators or teachers themselves may not even be wise as to the difference themselves. But education should provide the building blocks upon which one is able to decipher for himself or herself, to develop and to further attain, as well as the ability to properly process information for themselves. So the educator must be careful that they themselves are not indoctrinated under the guise of educating them. You can give information, and I say this all the time when I'm watching the news. Sometimes I can tell which news that I'm watching, how they're thinking, how they're leaning when it comes to politics, just by listening to them. as if we don't have the ability to take that information and decipher it for ourselves. You can tell when you're watching Fox, you can tell when it's ABC or CBS, just by the way in which they lean when they give the information. And it's okay for others to speak, but we should have the ability ourselves, and that comes from a proper education, that we can develop our own understanding from what it is that we heard. Now, public schools should afford all citizens the opportunity to learn in an effort to better their lives, to better themselves. It should teach the importance of personal responsibility. It should teach proper communication, just basic common sense morals, along with the reading, the writing, and other essential information that is based upon the student's academic, intellectual level of study. And we don't need to be introducing our babies to material, in particular sexual material, or anything relating to that at such a young age, where their minds have not even developed to start to think about such things. I think that is the highest in ignorance. Personal indoctrinating under the guise of education is a big problem. Now, America, as well as other countries around us, or societies and nations of people, may find distinctions as to the methods, or even as to what information is important to know, or whom should be educating. However, they would all agree that it is necessary to enable future generations to further have a great understanding or engage in with the world around them and other cultures, and develop, progress, and form a better society in which they live that can be helpful to others. And that's in all areas of life.
National Teachers Union held its annual summit in Portland, Oregon to adopt a new resolution that includes, some say, a political focus to fight against the education policies of the Trump administration. Joining us this morning to discuss is Defending Education's Director of Outreach, Erica Sanzi. Good morning to you. Tell us more about some of these policies that the National Education Association adopted. It is quite the list.
Yeah, I mean, one thing people need to know is that the largest teachers union in the country, the N.E.A., which I was actually a member of in 2 states, it is unrecognizable to what it used to be. It always leaned left, of course. It always gave more money to Democrats, but it has become a foot soldier for the far left in this country. And that was clear during this event over 4th of July weekend. For one thing, the resolutions are largely anti-Trump. So they speak about Trump a lot. They call him a fascist a lot. And they, for example, like, reasonable people can disagree on the efficacy of the Department of Education. But in this, it refers to any move to close down the department as racist. It also comes out in favor of, not only does it come out in favor of fighting any sort of like deportations or any actions by ICE, but it refers to ICE and what they're doing as kidnapping. So again, the language is really, really, inflammatory for sure. One thing that caught a lot of people's attention is that they decided to cut ties with the Anti-Defamation League. So the ADL, which generally has focused on fighting anti-Semitism, the N.E.A. came out and said that they were severing their relationship with them, and that they would no longer use, endorse, or publicize any materials from the ADL, including their curricular materials or any of their statistics. So that seems like a real swipe. And again, the N.E.A. has been very, very brazen in its anti-Israel messaging, and I think that this is just another example of that. So if anyone's wondering if they were talking about teaching and learning and improving student outcomes, the answer to that is definitively not. This was like a far left rally, and
They got more political, right, with their agenda, absolutely. And the Trump administration, no doubt, will fight back against anything that goes against Trump's America First agenda for education. In fact, as we're already seeing, the administration is not afraid of suing a state Department of Education, as they are in California, where they are suing the Department of Education there over Title IX violations. Tell us more about this lawsuit.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to you guys, I think 2 weeks ago about how the state of California was given until July 7th to comply with this resolution related to Title IX, and it meant that they needed to stop what they were doing in terms of using gender identity instead of biological sex when it came to sports, etc. And they have decided to dig in. They've doubled down. And so July 7th came and went. They decided not to comply with the resolution, unlike UPenn, who did comply with the resolution. And so they've been sued now by the Department of Education, by the Trump administration, and that includes their Department of Education in California has been sued, and also their Interscholastic Federation. And so we'll see where that goes. But essentially what the department is saying is that they want an immediate, and I should say the Department of Education under Linda McMahon, they want an immediate injunction so that the state can stop using gender identity when it comes to sports, and that includes not only the competition but also the what should be single sex spaces like locker rooms.
In 1993, Congressman Scott Fitzgerald of Washington, D.C. introduced a bill, and this bill was called Student. And it's an acronym, STUDENT. It says student, but it's stopping teachers' unions from damaging education needs today. It's an act to reform the National Education Association federal charter and rededicate the organization to the pursuit of increased student learning and quality education in schools across America. Now, it was intended to reform the N.E.A. federal charter. Now, the bill adds accountability and transparency provisions commonly found in other federal charters to improve them, make them more accountable and more transparent. It would include notifying employees of their First Amendment right to refrain from membership, receiving clear and affirmative consent to membership and payment of associated dues, prohibiting the N.E.A. from engaging in political activities and lobbying, and requiring the N.E.A. to submit annual reports to Congress, prohibiting N.E.A. affiliates from harming students and families with school shuttering walkouts, and requiring N.E.A. officers to be U.S. citizens, repealing a unique to N.E.A. D.C. tax break. Now, since receiving its federal charter, the N.E.A. has strayed far from its original purpose, becoming little more than a political machine masking as an advocate for public education and students. Now, the organization's massive political operation seems more interested in pushing a radical, progressive agenda than advocating for student and school. And this is said by Congressman Scott Fitzgerald. He said, I introduced the Student Act to rein in some of the worst practices to help make the N.E.A. less divisive, more in line with other federally chartered organizations, and more responsive to the needs to students. And that should be their only focus, or else they should name themselves something else. I think they should be neutral when it comes to these political parties and agendas. Now, at a conference, the N.E.A. voted down a business item to rededicate itself to the pursuit of increased student learning in every public school in America, but voted in support of the right to an abortion, supporting illegal immigration, and expanding professional development for educators to help create student gender sexuality alliance clubs. The Students Act would rightly hold the N.E.A. accountable to students, to parents, and to schools. And they should be. If they are choosing a political party and they have these specific agendas, they should not be representative of our public schools. Make yourself a separate organization. But the Freedom Foundation applauds Representative Fitzgerald for his proposed legislation to update and overhaul the National Education Association's 117-year-old federal charter. The National Education Association is no longer a professional association. It's not an advocate for quality education. It's not even nearly the largest teachers union in the country. First and foremost, it is a partisan political machine, but the futures of the millions of school children reliant on public education are far too important to be subject to the control and ideological extremism of the N.E.A. The innovative, practical reforms proposed by Representative Fitzgerald would go a long way towards curbing the N.E.A.'s most objectionable conduct, refocusing the organization on its original and appropriate mission of improving America's educational system and making the N.E.A. the kind of unifying organization that deserves a federal charter. And this was said by Freedom Foundation CEO Aaron White. Now you can subscribe and leave me your comment on what you think about the National Education Association's position in these political matters. I want to thank you for listening, and I want to invite you to join me next time for another discussion with Dena. Ta-ta!
This concludes your daily discussions with Dena. Join us Monday through Friday at 12:30 p.m. Like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment.
This past week, where delegates decided on an array of new radical anti-Trump policies to inject into America's school system.
Starting off strong, one of the resolutions voted on is a pledge to defend democracy against Trump's embrace of fascism. And these bright teachers spelt fascism wrong. Priorities, though. Oh, and it'll cost an extra $3,500.
In addition to fighting fascism, the N.E.A. says adopted other business items like opposing ICE kidnapping, defending students' right to organize against Trump policies, and supporting the No Kings movement.
Say them! Say them out loud!
That was special.